How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the weekly trading review. This is the week from 5/27 to 5/30. This week, I took 4 trades. Two of them were day trades. One was a swing, and then one was a diagonal that I opened up on an existing position. So very low trading activity for me this week. Total profits $111.63. So a little bit lower than usual, but after a big week last week, I'm glad I did not give those gains back, and I'm glad I was able to add to those gains, even if it was just a little bit. So let's get into the market first. We'll take a look at what happened this week, and then we'll go into the swing trades and the day trades. So, market on a D1 chart. Drawn a couple of lines over here. The most important thing I'm seeing technically is that obviously we got this big drop and then this big bounce, but I'm seeing this wedge right now on SPY, and I think it's going to break one way or the other. On the ceiling, we have resistance right below SPY 600. On the floor, we have support at the 100-day SMA. If you look at this chart, there's a little bit crazy, but some of these lines are just some AVWAPs that I've drawn here. This yellow one is the election AVWAP. This red is the AVWAP from the all-time high, and this purple one is the AVWAP Q attached to triple witching. So we're above all those AVWAPs, and we're still kind of in this upward sloping trend channel, this trend over here. We're in this bullish channel. To me, it looks like I drew one line over here that's a little bit steeper. That got breached as soon as this trend stopped. Now, the market has been moving sideways for pretty much 2 weeks. No net movement. It could break out one way or the other, but I feel like this is a critical juncture, and I don't want to be in a whole lot of swings. So a very, very minimal swing exposure at the moment. Now let's zoom into that M15 chart past couple of days. So we got that gap down last Friday on some EU tariffs that were proposed. Then those tariffs were walked back over the weekend. So we got this big pop up on Monday and had a nice gap and go bullish trend day that got just shy of the all-time high, or not the all-time high, the relative high in this range over here. So we got this gap up, and then for the rest of the week, you can see that we just got some choppy price action for a lot of the days. Gap ups were faded to the downside. Gap downs pushed up over here. Every time we got a move, it got reversed up. So we got poked, reversed up, poked, reversed up. So buyers were coming in over here and defending this move. But also, we didn't quite get above this high over here before we started to see it getting challenged, right? So if we started to get this move, but we had made a new relative high, like maybe at 600, and we started to see it, okay, at least it's mildly more bullish because we've preserved this uptrend. But right now, this move is getting challenged at 593, right? So a little bit below before we got here. Now, it still could go up higher, which would then just signal that, okay, maybe it's still bullish, but this is a pretty weak move because it got these gains got challenged all the way down here before we started to get that move up higher. Same thing with, it's actually pretty similar to this gap up on the 12th from the China tariff pause, where we get this move up and then those gains are challenged, right? And then we bounce up higher, and sort of same story. So this gap is holding for right now. And same thing here, this gap that we got is holding. Another thing you might notice is that a lot of these pops are a lot less stronger as a result of the tariff news. I think that sort of reaction is getting more muted because traders are getting more used to it. So not sure what's going to happen entirely in the future. To me, I think the big next wave of information is going to be Q2 earnings, as well as some further economic reports. We got the PCE that came out on Friday. That was still in line. So that's good from the inflation front. But the main thing I'm watching for here is if inflation starts to creep up and if Q2 earnings have a lot more lower guidance issued, a lot more negative reactions that we're seeing on the mega cap tech side, as well as there's any certain sectors that are starting to kind of wax and wane, right? If there's a lot more inflow into these defensive sectors, that's a bearish sign. If there is a lot of outflow out of tech, out of things like industrials, out of things like other sectors that might rely on, again, the global trade network to deliver physical goods, they're going to be a lot more sensitive to the tariff information. So, again, I'm not going to speculate on all that fundamental stuff. That's just kind of, what could happen. But what really matters is how institutions react to the information. And to me, it's going to take a while for this tariffs to trickle in because one, we got the pause over here in April, and two, that pause is going to be lifted in July, right? July 9th is when the pause can be lifted on those 90-day tariffs, and August, something like 9th or 8th, something like that. Whenever the China tariffs are pushed back, August 12th maybe, or 10th, that's, again, in the summer as well. August is a period of seasonal weakness. So, yeah, summer to me seems like the ideal time for this to roll over. We made a big move, and I think I could totally see this flat line, maybe meander up a little bit for another month, start to see some weakness lower, and then we start to get that weakness maybe into earnings. Okay. So that is the situation. Let's go to the swing of this week, which was Roblox. And I took Roblox on Monday. I took it pretty much at the close at around 85.44 or something. So pretty much right at the high of the day. Roblox had broken out of compression and held this gains at a nice long green candle. SPY had also gapped up and moved up higher. Roblox wasn't super out of the gate, and this is a pretty clean compression break, also above some of this high plus trend line as well. We'll go to the M5 chart here, and we'll zoom into where I entered Roblox. Yep, so I entered pretty much by the end of the day close at 85.45. I probably could have got a better entry, call it 50 cents lower, somewhere here, like $85 flat, closer to VWAP would be a little bit more ideal on a intraday basis, but can't sweat that. So Roblox kind of shot for a couple of days here. Had a drop down on the 29th, came back and rallied, and then on Friday, kind of crazy day where we had this gap up, got all the way up to 86.30, so almost $1 up on that. Came down, tested the bid, rallied up again, came down, another double bottom, rallied up again, and kind of a very choppy day. Now, if you look at what the market conditions were like as well, I'm going to zoom out. This yellow line is the line from the AVWAP from the May 14th level. So there is some relevancy here. You can see there's some price reaction around that. The other thing to notice is that a lot of times these AVWAPs, since there's price reaction at those levels, you can kind of notice these candles here, and that tends to form a pretty decent level of support that you can follow. So a lot of times the price action will sort of signify if there is some intermediate relevel over here. Okay, so this is the price action this week. Here's a price action for Roblox. You can see that it did manage to get above higher while SPY was pretty flat. So it was mildly bullish, but it wasn't super strong. So market was pulling back over here. The stock was holding up pretty well, flatlining, but pretty choppy. Wasn't able to get that lift off. We didn't really have the market tailwind this week like we had a couple of weeks ago. If I look at just what happened a week or two ago where we did have a market tailwind. So didn't have that in my favor. So when I got in here and I actually took a gain. I got in here at 85.40, and then I took gains kind of right in the middle of this candle at 85.74. So just, I think maybe a 29-cent profit I took on the trade. So effectively a scratch. Because Market was kind of flat here. Where did I take this off? This was 12.20. I think I took it. Yeah, 12.20. I took it off. So right on this candle over here, where I was like, look, I'm up on Roblox, so I'm gonna take some gains now. The market hasn't really gone anywhere. The stock really hasn't gone anywhere, and I don't really know where the market is going to go. So I could hold on to this, but I kind of expected a better reaction off this. Like, I'm fine after like a day or two of pause. That's fine, right? Check the bid. That's fine. But want to see something to actually get off the deck a little bit. And we just needed this kind of sell-off to get back up over here. The market, again, as I mentioned earlier, found resistance a lot sooner before that 595 relative high. So that's telling me, okay, there's not a lot of eagerness on the side of buyers right now. And there's some eagerness in Roblox, but I'm going to get out for a small profit, basically a scratch, and then just evaluate from the sidelines. So that's what I did on Roblox. Now, obviously, it closed a little bit higher, so I had the chance to maybe, get a better exit out of here, call it 60 cents higher, 75 cents higher, so I can make a little bit more money on that. But it was more about the decision of, okay, I'm going to just stay more on the sidelines right now, not swing a whole lot, because I'd rather take the small scratch than hold something too long where I'm not sure. And then if it's a 50-50 situation where the market goes against me, then I'm thinking about, oh man, like I got to have this loser versus me getting out when I feel like I'm avoiding a more coin flip market scenario here. So that was Roblox. The other swing that I'm in was Qubit. And I went long Qubit right over here, May 23rd, around, I took the July 18th $9 calls for $5.20. Took it right when the stock was around 1375-ish. Stock has pulled back here. It was testing this breakout high, had a pop up over here on the 29th, and then that got smacked down to its AVWAP E. Now it's below the 8 EMA, and it's probably going to test the support level around $10. So it's hitting some resistance over here at the gap. So I'm still long the calls because, one, it's a little bit more independent of the market. And then two, if you look at this volume here, ton of volume coming in on this candle here, almost as much as the earnings candle, right? It's pushing into the gap. And there's not as much volume of it getting smacked down from the gap over here. And compare it to like some of these candles here, right? Super high volume candle at around 1270, 1273 this high, 1270, 1273. So ton of volume coming over here into the gap. And it closed into the gap. It held that gap, but so far it is starting to reject off that gap. Now, I took profit on I sold, I think, this week $16 calls for, I think I sold them for, 20 cents. And I closed them out on Friday for 3 cents. So that's a 17-cent profit on those short calls, or about 85%. And then I sold the 14 calls on Friday, next week's 14 calls, for 12 cents. You just couldn't get a decent fill on the pop. I didn't want to get anything closer because $14 is a pretty likely place where I could get out of the trade and still be profitable. So just going to find selling these short calls against it, which will bring the cost basis of this down just a little bit. Something like, 2-3% a week, but adds up if you get a couple of weeks in there. All right, so that is Qubit. So still hanging on to it right now. I think it's still valid on a D1 chart, still leading on this level. If it starts to break below this level, then I'm gonna have to start to think about getting out of the trade. But I have support at this point over here. I don't have a lot of market tailwind, so if we get a nice pop up over here, and the market's still looking flat or weak, I might take some gains. If we get a pop up and the market is looking pretty good, I might hold it on a little bit longer. I know I mentioned that this stock is a little more independent, but typically, right, you'll see that usually when the market is doing not, at least if it's flat or okay, right, when the market starts to rally here, this is in December, right, these stocks can actually rally up if there is a bullish market tailwind because some of the buying are these quantum stocks. And when the market tanks, these stocks don't completely lose all of their value, but they're pulling back here a little bit. They retrace some of these gains. Exponential wild chart here. And it's sort of like, it's not really a tail that wags the dog sort of thing, but I know that this stock is more likely to rally if the market is at least mildly bullish, and it's way less likely to rally if the market is bearish or mildly bearish or even flat for that matter. So those are the two swings. Only open position right now is this qubit swing here. Now let's look at the day trades. First day trade I took this week was Carvana. So Carvana, I took it on the 28th. So let's go into this day. And here's the D1 chart on Carvana. Obviously, very nice chart. This is a high plus trend line that broke. Here's another high plus trend line that's going to come into play somewhere around this level. And then, yeah, Carvana, pretty strong during the market pullback last week. Didn't give up a ton of those gains. And then kind of shot up this week out of a cannon. Okay. So, here's the backdrop on Tuesday. Market gap up, pop up over here, and then gets smacked down with this red candle, and we fill in this gap, and we see some selling pressure to the downside. Then the selling pressure starts to flatten out here for maybe call it hour and a half, something like that. Yeah, hour and a half-ish. So we start to get some lift off after an hour. And here's what I'm thinking. We got this nice move here. We got a pullback over here. Not a super weak pullback. Sorry, not a super strong pullback. Not a super strong move up. But we definitely have a bullish bias here. So I figured that once this dip stalls, I have a pretty good chance of buying this dip and taking a relatively strong stock. So I just need this dip for me to find a relatively strong stock. So the first 2 hours, I'm looking for stocks, and I see Carvana. So here's Carvana, the M5 chart. Had it kind of gapped up here, and it's preserving all of these gains. And we get a breakdown through the gap to this downward sloping trend line somewhere around here at 1205. And then the stock gets some lift off afterwards. So I enter this trade at 1250. So where is 1250? Right here. So market has staged a bit of a rally here. Pretty weak rally, but it's looking decent. Carvana, here's Carvana at 12. So ideally, it's better for me. The better entry is somewhere over here. But I got another nice entry when it broke through the high of the day. We got this long tail on this candle. So even though we closed above the high of the day, I don't love to enter on these bearish candles. And then I saw this candle here at 1250. I'm like, all right, this is nice. So on 1245, this is the candle here where it's moving around. And then I get my entry at 321.43, which was pretty good to this close of the prior candle, just above that close. And then here is the 1245 candle. Yep. So we go over here, and then we kind of move up, and we get this nice long green candle. And I'm watching this candle here. My target was somewhere like maybe 323, so I figured there's a chance it could maybe poke above it. We get this doji over here at 105, and that's when I decide to exit the position at 322.55. So it took a $1.13 profit per share. I was long 75 shares of that position. Pretty quick trade. As far as I can see, SPY had poked up to VWAP over here at 115. This stock was already starting to move lower then. Here's it at 1 o'clock. Yeah, 1 o'clock it popped up over here. So a little bit of a market pop. But yeah, I felt like Excuse me. Carvana is a pretty choppy stock. So again, after it makes a big run like this, it's probably going to retrace, and I'm better off taking these gains into strength here. Otherwise, I have to wait through a pullback and then try to get out on the next pop up, and I just don't really want to have to do that. So that is was pretty much the deal with Carvana. So quick trade and a short trade. Next trade I took ANF short. So not your usual bearish trade, but we had a gap up in the stock, massive bearish hammer of news, right? That just erased a whole shit ton of this gap and got through that SMA pretty nicely. And then we kind of rested right at the this gap over here. That's looking good. So the next day, the 29th, this stock is continuing to fill in the gap. It's below that prior day low. Ton of momentum, and it has room to some of these, support levels, over here, right? The 8 EMAs coming up over here. There's some horizontal support here, maybe kind of around the open of this candle. Might be some support. So a couple of these levels here, but definitely has a ton of steam and a ton of volume. So this is the market on the 29th. Gap up, fill in the gap here. Really choppy gap day. And then once we filled in this gap here, we get a poke, right? Massive bullish hammer on volume, back to the range, and then we just kind of die out for the rest of the day. So here was a day on ANF. We get a big move down, and we rally up to above VWAP, which is, again, not my ideal short over here. But the stock puts in this double top over here, and it starts to close below VWAP. So this is when I take the short right over here. I'm short ANF 75 shares at 82.93. And yeah, I take it kind of this 125 candle. And I take it right over here. So I really liked, I feel like I did a really great job of timing my entry on this guy, where here's 125. You can see how the market is bounced up, right? We get some tails above bodies. We're rejecting at VWAP over here. To me, there's a good chance we're going to make a move to the low of the day. I don't think we're going to break it because this bounce is pretty tall. We got back into the range, tested VWAP, and we also broke above this high of this long red candle over here. So all that tells me that this day, this is probably a little move lower, but probably not a strong move lower. So if I look at ANF, right, I see that double top. It got some relative strength earlier, which meant it probably hit some D1 support. And then I took it right here on this fresh little sell signal. Yeah, right, kind of right around here. Now, I was watching this level. It got poked below here because I wanted this pivot low to break. But this pivot low never actually broke, right? Right here. Poked through, but it didn't actually break. So I needed this to break. Now, the market starts to leak a little bit lower here, right? And ANF does nothing, does absolutely nothing. Or look at this, right? Here's this 215 candle on ANF. Here's a 215 candle in the market. So I exit ANF for a scratch at 2, so about 40 minutes later, because market was moving down slowly, and I didn't think it was going to make a really strong move. ANF should have moved down, right? This is get the double top. It should be able to break through here. And the fact that it couldn't tells me that there are some buyers over here, and I'm going to get out of the move. Now, after this break, I knew it was probably a good chance it was going to retest VWAP, so I was fine with this retesting VWAP, but the longer it compressed and didn't start to move with the market, the worse my odds of success are. So scratch out of that trade at 2, and ended up being a pretty good move day trading wise as the stock rallied, and then yeah, kind of came back over here at the high of the day, closed right over here. Ended up being a pretty nice swing, an overnight swing with a ton of momentum. So take that how you will, especially with the bearish move that we got on Friday. And yeah, kind of made a big move. I don't think it quite filled the gap, but it got pretty close. So And that was ANF. That was my scratch. And that was it. That was it this week. No other trades were taken. There was a couple of good trades that I saw but didn't end up taking, which is going to happen. There's always going to be a couple of good trades where you take it, but not everything's quite right. So, you end up missing a pretty nice opportunity. Like I had that earlier this week with DJT. I found it on the break of this 50 SMA at around 22.40 and made a really nice move lower before it came back up to test that level. It's a kind of a newsy stock. Didn't know what it was going to do, but technically it was a really nice entry that I could have sniped over there. All right. So, yeah, that's it for this week. Next week, beginning of the month, so at least we're going to have some economic data points. Unemployment report is going to come out. Things like JOLTS, ISM going to come out as well, jobless stuff. So that might move the market a little bit. We might get some movement on some of those days, so that'll keep it a little bit more fresh. I think we're going to break out of this wedge one way or the other. For me, only long right now I have is Qubit long. Outside of that, I'm just sticking with day trades, and then when we get this break one way or the other, I'm going to take the swings. But for right now, I'm on the sidelines, and I'm waiting for things to unfold. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will get the next weekly trading review out next week. See you then.